Right, so it's starting to rain. Here's a box attached to the side of the hangar with a doorway on the outside for getting hay, also chicken wire up the top, covered in ivy. Never mind. At the front, you load it up with hay, planking to the left-hand side of it up to about halfway along that beam, that upright, and you can see the triangular braces. Another internal wall coming from the outside beam supporting the long purlin just inside of the gutter. Another upright about 1 metre inside. Triangular pieces again. Bracing going up to the wall. That's a fairly thin piece to the right of the little staircase here. So that upright is fairly thin, fairly waterlogged. Up the top, possibly a pigeon coop, possibly another pigeon coop. Going up onto the bank, there's a mirror there. So this isn't stone dwarf wall, it looks like it's wood, and it looks like there's a long, thickish beam acting as the primary support, and below it is just planking. But you can see that the soil level on the other side is remarkably close to that, so that probably needs to be dug out on the outside. That's all of the structures supporting the roof, and you've got a doorway on the side there going out to the slope going up behind the building. So back around on that tin wall, and then in the corner over here there's a doorway which would have gone out and a stack of storage. And then on top of the boiler room block there's a gap for storage, stone wall, roof light, beams going across holding everything in place. That looks like there's a joint up there of the beam, which could be a point of failure. Soil levels seem to slope up towards the block for the boiler room, and no points of ingress here except for a little, can't really see it with that. So there's just down here, there's a little hole which could have been a pipe, maybe an input, water input, who knows. There seems to be an earthing rod here which goes, the cable goes up and then into the boiler room. But that end wall is particularly sodden. I suspect that those steps over there are probably at ground level at the top, so that's probably why. It's probably completely soaked outside. This bank has got a little tree, or evidence of a tree having been growing there, so I suspect that isn't concrete. I suspect it's just soil. Well, there is a stone wall fronting it, but that doesn't mean that it's strong. Right, so here we are in what used to be the living room. You can see a post which forms the left-hand side of the door, As you see, the post goes up to the ceiling. It goes into the beam which crosses over to just to the left of the window reveal. At the base of the post, you'll see quite a lot of woodworm evidence, so that needs to be treated. The wall which the post is supporting, which is just in front of the front door, is a plaster block wall, quite sort of ceramic sounding when you tap it. The wall which is here, it's got a window in it, and that's the same material, and that goes up to the second beam in this large new build part of the house. The wall on the back is also the same material. At the floor level it seems to be okay. Having put the laser level on the floor, it was about 50 centimetres consistently right the way around the wall, so it looked like the floor is pretty level. The ceiling seems to have a bit of a bow at there, but that's obviously with underneath whatever beams are up there and tongue and groove attached to the bottom of that. So you've got some beading supporting the tongue and groove, then you've got wallpaper and you've got plaster. Now the paper at the bottom has got this foil backing on it, so they've obviously tried to tank the wall on top of the plaster from ground level upwards. Going across to the corner, you've got a ladder. Then you've got the window reveal and a little bit of space above the window, below the window. I haven't managed to get the wallpaper off of there yet, but I suspect that might be tanked and plastered as well, tanked with the same sort of foil-backed paper, who knows. There's a shelf at the bottom, and the shelf may be above the stone window reveal. So the measurement that I've got for the stone window reveal, which is about 1.71 metres, might need to have the thickness of that shelf added to it. Taking out the door, having a look down there at the floor, that seems all easy enough to remove. And back up here, tongue and groove at the top and a clad beam. Now I've measured the beam including the cladding, taking a laser point from the floor and measuring it to the outside of this separating wall. So obviously the separating wall is flush with the beam at the top of the wall, so that's okay. We've got electrics up here in plastic conduit, which will soon be removed. It seemed to have what looks like a beading, perhaps a wooden boxed in beam above the doorway, which could be interesting. Then we've got the conduiting. We've got the second beam in this room, second beam coming from the left as viewed from the outside front. And then we've got another wall which is in this plaster block type stuff. We've got wallpaper and probably plastered on the inside. Going into this room, we have a curtain rail up the very top and a consumer unit for the electrics, but I think that's possibly just a fuse box, I'm not sure, because going over the top it then comes down to a fuse box which goes down to a meter, which goes down to the whatever that is. Now the electrician who just came switched this switch as a default and that one as a reset, or vice versa. So he was saying that they would switch this back on and he would then come and put a chantier section down here just to sort of for working on. Looking up the top there, seems to be some evidence of There's that electric cabling in the wall up there. I'll have to get a light at that in a minute. Coming around to the top of the shroud for the chimney. There's a hole at the side there, which obviously had a stove going into it. So there must have been a wood burner stove to the right of the chimney breast. Chimney breast itself is painted red, but probably made out of just brick. So that could probably be stripped back. There's a wooden surround for the chimney. And this is the third beam that goes across, which, as you can see, is just to the right-hand side, looking from the outside of that window. Back wall, the external wall going to the hanger on the outside. No breach on this side for another vent, but the corbels support this fire hood. Looking down at the floor, a little bit of firewood perhaps. Paper on the walls all seem to be fairly degraded. Evidence of some metal brackets here for what? Don't know. Electrics. Floor level stuff here. Another one of these plaster block walls going up to the second beam, and again we've got plastic conduiting going straight from the electric box to outside. Underneath it, of course, you've got square conduiting to a light switch there. So maybe square conduiting is for lighting, and maybe round conduiting goes outside to the boiler room. So here we go into the stairwell, I suppose you'd call it, or the back lobby. So we've got the back door there, and then staircase, or the bottom of the staircase, underneath of the staircase there, which, as you can see, is a little bit basic. And then beyond, you can see the bathroom. The bathroom was added where they pierced through the wall into the barn and then put in a breeze block building inside the barn. And then they just put some joists across the top, plasterboarded it, insulated it, and the water came in and it all collapsed. So as you can see, we have a lovely sink. We have a unit underneath the sink, complete with mushrooms, a little bit of fallen down glass fibre. The bath, lovely. A bit of glass fibre in it, plenty of mud. A toilet with a flush, some interesting staining on the wall, and for some bizarre reason, a window. A window that opened out into the inside of the barn. Not quite sure why, but anyway. And we have jointed plasterboard without paint. As you can see, the light fitting on the wall above the sink, really safe. And the light fitting at the ceiling, quite finished, perfectly attractive. And then you can probably see beyond, maybe not, in the shadows up there, you can see the hay hanging down, just like over there. Gorgeous. Anyway, let's have a look upstairs. So we've got stairs which have seen better days, but they're still relatively solid. Going around the corner, up the stairs, and another unfinished plasterboard wall. Very odd. We've got wallpaper which has seen better days, and straight through into what would have been the master bedroom. As you can see, the beam is squarely mid-forehead height. You can see the top of the hood made of mud which would have been above the fireplace. So you've got plasterboard on the wall over there, which we're going to have to remove and find out what's happening behind it, because behind that should be the stone wall. And then in the corner, carries around more plasterboard, more plasterboard. Looking up to the ceiling, a tiny little skylight. And you can see it's got tiles. So that is literally the bottom, the underneath of the roof. Then another one, this internal partition wall. A doorway which presumably afforded them some sort of comfort. You've got a wood partition. I don't know whether it's how thick that is. We'll have a look in a second. Quick duck underneath the beam. Window at the front. Stone wall visible there. Not quite sure why they've got this boarding on the beam. I suspect that there must be a gap above the beam before you hit the plasterboard ceiling, so that's going to be kind of fun. A little bit of evidence up here of rainwater ingress. Strange idea to have an aerial inside the bedroom. Well, never mind. Let's have a look at the other side of this wooden wall. So there's the second beam upstairs. They seem to have plastered above it to another piece of plywood. So presumably there's a gap above the beam before you get to the ceiling level, which would be why they wanted to do that. Another one of these delightful wall lights where the cable just comes straight out of the wall. Anyway, we have electric sockets at the floor, all mod cons, surface mounted cable, perfect, low level window, or low level window sill, and above the window you've got 2/3 of a metre before you hit the ceiling. They have put that nasty plastery stuff all over the beam. We have some sort of a cupboard going on here. And then on the other side, we have the taller window, which has a bit of a dormer above it. So this is the other side of that wooden wall. So you can see the wood there, and there doesn't seem to be much difference between that, different surface between that and the back of that cupboard. So I'm assuming that the hardboard which is on that cupboard goes straight onto the wood. So there's not much thickness to it, which is all right if you're going to remove it, which we will. Okay, and looking above the cupboard, there seems to be a light socket above the cupboard, which is obviously the place where you need a light. Hopefully this internal upright isn't actually acting as a support for the beam. I suspect not. So let's wander back downstairs. I'll switch off so I don't fall. Right, so now we're going to go into the barn, and suddenly we're faced with what used to be a toilet. It's a toilet block which has been built into the barn from the new end. So we have a ladder. So for the first time ever, we're going to go up onto the mezzanine. And there's a sort of hay loft, hence the hay. And this mezzanine is where all the hay was stored. So we can see quite a lot of hay. On the top of the wall plate, quite a lot of ivy. There are some cracks, probably not too terrible. Some evidence of water coming in. And if you look at the floor, which is all covered with hay, you've also got what I suspect are owl droppings. And over here we have some sort of a swallow's nest. And you can see over there there's some evidence of some other critters, possibly rats, who've been burrowing into the hay to make a life for themselves. So on top of this makeshift toilet block, bath block, whatever, they had just sort of joists across it, across the top, infilled with wire glass insulation. And with all the rain that's come through over the years that it's been empty, that's all just caved in and fallen inside the room. There's a bit more of the fiberglass insulation floating around on the outside there, on the edge. And then underneath, it's a bit dark, but maybe you can see. Inside we also have two great big 6-foot tall barrels. We haven't yet looked inside to see what's in them. This is obviously Normandy, which is Calvados region. Well, Calvados the drink, Calvados the region is north of us. So there's an awful lot of people, farmers, who have apples, who make their own hooch in their farms. So let's go back outside. So this is the old part of the house. It had a fireplace with a fire surround, fire hood. As you can see, the walls are a little bit perished. Ferns are nice, always nice to have some fresh flowers in the house. There is a door going out the back, although it seems to be covered in some kind of insulation at the moment. They separated this old part of the house by a wooden partition. It's sort of like fiberboard, but maybe not. That's the door going outside, and if we pull back, there's the outside, and there's the front window with some sort of a cupboard underneath. Now, that's the old electrics that used to come in. That's no longer functioning. There's no actual feed to that at all. And bizarrely, you can see that there's a beam which is almost resting on the lintel above that window. Next to the beam, there's a little window for no really good reason. Anyway, going into the other half of this room, we have cubbyhole, but there's another door coming in from outside. Don't know quite why. Obviously it was supposed to be 2 rooms at some point. And there is also a staircase going upstairs. And you can see that the stairs are somewhat past their best. So we're going to be treading quite carefully as we go upstairs to look at the upstairs of the old house. And you can see the water that's coming in. So let's climb over the banisters and into the upstairs room. Now we can see the beam is resting on the wall plate, or built into the wall plate over there, which is quite nice. Be careful where I'm standing here because it's a little bit rotten. So the beam over there into the wall plate, a little bit of a crack on the far side. King post going up. It looks all right up there. And joist coming down. and that beam goes into the wall plate over there. So, stepping aside over here, you can see that the joist coming down rests on the beam inside of the wall plate, which is a bit awkward if we want to remove that beam. And that gets worse when you look at the central beam, which is there. So that beam coming down, joist coming down, joist, yeah, coming down, rests on that central beam, which is resting into the wall plate in the side wall, and it's significantly degraded, that beam. So that beam ideally would go, but if it does, the hell does that beam, that joist coming down, rest on? So that's going to be an interesting one. And just to show you one of the previous residents, apart from all of the owl droppings down here, and on top of the beam, there are plenty more owl droppings, and we also have one of the previous residents. Now, I'm suspecting that that is a pine marten. It's a little bit dried out, but hey. And then the beam on this end is doing the same game again, resting on, the joist is coming down and resting on that beam. So that's going to make it a little bit challenging. Hello, pine marten. Let's just go under the pine marten. No, I think we'll leave them where they are. Well, I've switched off the light, and now you can have a look around and see all of the light flooding in from outside through the missing tiles and above the gaps where the wall doesn't meet the ceiling. Please subscribe so that YouTube will look favourably on us, and join us next time where we'll start working in the kitchen.